Hey everyone! So I am finally coming to you with my December wrap-up. This video kind of got bumped. I don't know how. I don't know what happened, but it's here finally, and I can finally talk about all of the books that I read in December. December was super exciting as far as reading goes, just because I finally hit my 100 goal challenge, and I probably could have gone a little bit beyond that, but pretty much once I hit that, I was just like, alright, it's time for some Netflix. So yeah, that's where I stopped. I stopped at an even 100, but in order to get to that, I had to read 11 books in this month, which is obviously what I did, so let's get into the books. The first book that I got to in December is Zeros by Scott Westerfeld. This book, I feel like, hasn't been received very well this year. I personally love this book. I gave it a full 5 stars. I was very enthralled with the characters. It takes a little bit to kind of get into the story and figure out what's going on, but the story is about a group of kids who have superpowers, and they're not necessarily the typical conventional superpowers. They're very different and they're very involved powers that I just really enjoyed thinking about it. I really liked the different aspects that each character had, and the depth of their power is very intriguing to me, so I think that's what held my interest through the whole thing. But if you're at all interested in anything like that, I highly recommend it. Scott Westerfeld is one of my favorite authors. I've been reading him for a long time, and he's very good to his fans. I've talked to him before. He's one of the nicest guys out there, so I highly recommend giving his books a try. The next book that I got to this month is The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness. This was my first Patrick Ness book, and I am not turning back. I know this was not necessarily the prime example that I should be using for his writing, but it was enough to get me involved to read the rest of his stuff. This book, I remember hearing about its concept when it first got announced, and I loved the idea that this book is about everybody else in the town that happens to have the teenager or the group of kids who are involved in an epic story. And this is just about everybody else kind of living in this strange town where bizarre things happen and kids go missing and people turn up dead, and they just have to continue on with their everyday life. I loved that concept, and then this book also brought in a lot of coming of age and mental illness, and I just felt like it dealt with that very well. It was not sugarcoating anything as far as mental illness goes, and I really loved everything about this book. It seemed very simple, but after I finished reading it, I kept thinking about it. So I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars. I highly recommend it. The next book that I read this month is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This book has been getting a lot of hype recently, and I just really wanted to check it out. I didn't really know much going into it, so I kind of went in blind, and I'm kind of glad that I did. It was a very intense reading experience because of that, I think. This book is pretty much set in a world where a pandemic wipes out like 99% of the population, and it jumps around in time between after this happened, 20 years after it happened, right before it happened, as it's happening, and it's got an amazing cast of characters in it, all of which are very well developed in a short amount of time that you are left thinking about those people well after you're done reading it. And I feel like it was such a terrifying, like, realistic approach to the end of the world sort of situation, but it was done so beautifully, and the writing is just so intriguing in this book. I highly recommend checking this book out. It was great. I gave it 4 stars. Check it out. The next book that I got to is one that everybody is getting to recently, and that is Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. I was kind of actually gonna wait to pick this up just because it seemed kind of daunting. It was a really big book, and I wasn't necessarily in the mood for this type of book. But I just kind of went with it, and I am so glad that I did. In case you've been living under a rock, this book is about the fan fiction that is written in Rainbow Rowell's other book, Fangirl. And it pretty much reads like the last book in a Harry Potter type series. That's what it's supposed to be. It's kind of supposed to be fan fiction like Harry Potter, and it's the end of the series, and it's an epic finale. And I wasn't too sure how I would feel about going into a book like this at the end of a series, even though you're not really supposed to have read the rest of the series. I don't know. I was just pleasantly surprised by this. I wasn't as blown away as some people are. Some people are just raving and raving about this book. I thought it was very good. It held my attention. It was funny. It was emotional. But it was just a really enjoyable experience that I feel like this generation of Harry Potter fans can appreciate. I don't necessarily know how this will be received in the future or how this would have been received had Harry Potter not happened to our generation. It's a very idyllic type of book, and I don't know. I definitely recommend it. It was very good. I gave it 4 stars. It was enjoyable. The next book that I got to was highly inspired by a previous book mentioned, but that book is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. Like I said, I kind of hit the Patrick Ness bandwagon this month, and I am loving every second of it. This was just a very short book that has been sitting on my bookshelf for a really long time. Being beautiful. Look at it. It's just so pretty. Look at it naked. Still pretty. Still gorgeous. Look at that. It's beautiful. But this book seemed like it was going to be a heart-wrencher, and it was. It so was. This book is pretty much kind of a short story. It's very short. About a boy who is dealing with his mom dying of cancer, basically, and there is a monster who is kind of a tree in his backyard that comes to him at night to tell him stories and ultimately wants to hear the boy's story. And that's all I really want to say about it. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful book. The symbolism in this book is just, it's spot on. It is just so good and so emotional, and this book had me in tears, I'm not gonna lie. It was just so good. And in case you're curious, I just found out that I think they're turning this into a movie this year. I'm not too sure how that will end up. I definitely pictured it like a movie in my head. It's very descriptive in that way, but I don't know how they're gonna turn it into a full-length movie because it read beautifully as a very quick story. So who knows, but check this book out if you are interested before the movie comes out. The next 2 books that I got to, I mentioned in the last video that I made, but I basically gave Gillian Flynn another chance. Little known fact, I absolutely despise Gone Girl. Not anything against the writing, but just how it ended and everything about that book just irked me in a way that I could not get over. And I gave it like a year or 2. I read it last year, I think, and decided to give her another chance. Just because of how popular she is, I kind of wanted to see what the hype was about, if I was missing something that I didn't know what other people were crazy about. But I read Sharp Objects and Dark Places this month, and obviously because I read both of them, you can tell that I kind of understand now. I read Sharp Objects first, and I actually really, really liked it. It definitely dealt with hard topics. Her books are always really morbid and gory and disturbing, but in the realist way that a horror mystery type book can be. Same thing with Dark Places. Both of these dealt with very different topics. Sharp Objects deals with kind of a southern town dealing with murders of girls and how it relates to the protagonist coming back to this hometown to report on it. And of course she has a whole slew of personal mental issues going for her, like all of Gillian Flynn's main characters seem to. And Dark Places is another similar, like, person reverting back to the roots of horrible upbringing. I don't really know how else to describe it, but those are what a lot of her characters seem to be. And I gave Sharp Objects 4 stars and Dark Places 3 stars. I just connected more with Sharp Objects, I think. But if you're in for a really, really dark roller coaster of a ride of a book, I recommend checking her books out, because whether I think I'm going to enjoy the book or not, I will probably always pick up her writing because it's that intriguing to me. So yeah. The next book that I got to is Say What You Will by Cami McGovern. This book started out great. I loved the premise of this going in. This book is about a girl with cerebral palsy and a boy with some serious anxiety issues. And it's about their friendship and their relationship and growing up through high school and just coming of age. And that just seemed like it was going to be such an inspirational story, and it just was not. I know this book has gotten a lot of praise just for dealing with main characters who have disabilities, and I feel like that shouldn't be the appeal of a book. Because I feel like that's kind of all these characters ended up being. They kind of were not necessarily well-rounded. They definitely were not great characters in my mind. By the end of this book, I was just so frustrated with the choices that they were making, and I know that makes it more real because they definitely didn't make good choices in their life, which is very realistic, but I got so frustrated with how this ended up, and I feel like a lot of things that happened in it were overdone. Like, it was things that would never have happened, and it just started to be very unbelievable in my mind. I gave this book only 2 stars. It just wasn't what I expected it to be at all. The next book was even worse, to be honest. I read Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist by David Levithan and Rachel Cohn, I believe. And I had high hopes for this just because I love David Levithan's writing. Love it. But as I was reading it, I realized that I had seen the movie back when it came out in probably, 2009 or something like that. And I did not like the movie. That should have been a hint that I would not like the book. I think this book would have very much appealed to me when I was a teenager. It's pretty much about this boy and a girl who kind of randomly run into each other in a club, and it's their escapades that they go out on throughout the night in New York City. And I could just in no way relate to these characters at all. I might have thought that this book was really, really cool when I was a younger kid and had all the music influence in it, and it was just very hipstery. And I feel like as more of an adult now, I just was so annoyed by their characters. Everything about it was just like angsty, and you knew what was gonna happen. So I just kind of wanted to finish it. It was one of those books where I struggled to get through it, and I probably would have DNF'd it, but it was a short book, so I figured I should just read it. But yeah, it only got 1 star for me. It just was not anything that I could relate to in any way, shape, or form. The next book that I got to was Winter by Marissa Meyer. This is yet another book that is huge right now because it just came out, and this is the final chapter in the Lunar Chronicles series, and I am so sad that it's over, but it was such a satisfying ending. I'm not going to give any really description about it, so I won't spoil the series for anybody who hasn't read it, but needless to say, this is a retelling of Snow White, and along with the whole cast of other fairy tale retelling characters that have been in the Lunar Chronicles, this book, it dragged a little bit in some parts. I feel like it could have been sped up a little bit. This book is huge. I mean, it doesn't look huge because of the little teeny tiny thin pages, but it's 820 something pages, and I feel like it could have been cut down a little bit, but regardless, it kind of drew it out so I could live with these characters just a little bit longer, so I can appreciate that. It was just such a satisfying ending, and I am just so happy with this book. I gave it 5 stars. It was great. I loved it. And the last book that I got to is Finding Audrey by Sophie Kinsella. This is a book that came out this year, and I've heard a bunch of people talking about it, but I have never read anything by Sophie Kinsella. It's just very much not my taste, to be honest. But when I heard the description of this book, I was very intrigued by it because I know that it deals with a girl with severe anxiety, and I kind of want to give it a try. I like a lot of contemporary books that have a lot of darker psychological undertones in them, and this book definitely had that. It's about a girl where something happened to her earlier on, and she has crippling social anxiety. Can't leave the house, wears sunglasses all the time, and it's pretty much about her starting to find herself again, obviously finding Audrey. It was just very, very well done. It's very tastefully done as far as the whole mental illness aspect of it goes. And it was lighthearted, but it still got the point across, and I just really enjoyed that it didn't delve into the things that you tend to want YA books to delve into. It just kind of glazed over stuff that you didn't need to know and focused on the points that I felt like you did need to know. And it came together really well. I just really enjoyed it. It kind of reads like a short story. Like, there's not much plot to it, but I just really, really enjoyed the characters, and it definitely stuck with me after reading it. So I gave it 4 stars. It was a really good book to end the year on, so I'm happy that my last book was a great book. So that's gonna be it. This is a very long, rambly wrap-up. I apologize for that. I hope you guys had an amazing reading year, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!